I take a different approach from it. You're not picking or finding your niche. Your niche will speak to you. Your niche will appear in front of you. Discovering your profitable, this is the important part, by the way. I always say profitable niche. I don't just say niche. It needs to be profitable.
Oh, there's a big difference there.
Yeah, think about it. We're not running a hobby here, right? We're running a business. So it needs to be.
Maiko, I am so excited to have you here today. Oh my gosh, I am so pumped. Now, you and I met on Twitter. And
Correct.
This is one of those relationships that you meet somebody virtually on a social media platform, but you never really get to see them in person. So this is the first time that you and I are having a conversation,
right,
face-to-face, virtually face-to-face.
And no interruptions.
Exactly. Yeah. So I am so excited to have you here because you are going to be sharing some really good information with everybody today. And I just appreciate you taking the time to join me.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great. When I first met you on Twitter, I believe it was in a chat or something along those lines, and your whole vibe was about niching down and why that was so important. And you actually have a test that you can take on your website to find out like where you fit. But first of all, let's talk about how did you first decide that niching down was important? What got you on this journey?
Right. So it was kind of like happened accidentally. I had an opportunity to present in front of a bunch of winners. There was a startup competition at WeWork, organization, and my job was to present something that would be useful for them. The startup environment is a little bit different from, like a service business owner environment. But I figured, let's talk about positioning without really talking about positioning. So the framework itself is still the same. It's just a 3-circle Venn diagram. I'm not going to, get into all that nitty gritty of it, but very simple framework. And the feedback that I got from that was really good. So back then I thought, you know what? To me, I didn't think anything of it. I was just trying to look for something that could be useful for them. Right. But then I realized, maybe I really need to focus on this and make sure that the people can get the concept right. So that's how it started.
That's interesting. Now, I know when I first started in my business a long time ago, if someone had told me that I need to niche down, that would have scared me because in my mind, that would mean that I'm leaving money on the table, that I'm not talking to everybody, and my product or my service was able to help a lot of people, not just one particular person. But what exactly is niching down? Because you actually enlightened me about what niching down was, even after that point. So what is niching down?
Yeah, so basically, a lot of people use this expression, finding a niche or, picking a niche. I take a different approach from it. You're not picking or finding your niche. Your niche will speak to you. Your niche will appear in front of you. Discovering your profitable, this is the important part, by the way. I always say profitable niche. I don't just say niche. It needs to be profitable.
Oh, there's a big difference there.
Yeah, think about it. We're not running a hobby here, right? We're running a business. So it needs to be profitable. It's a byproduct of you experimenting your business. It's okay to have some bad client experiences, right? You need to you can read about it all you want, but unless you really go through with the real life experience, it's harder for you to really determine what works for you and what doesn't work for you. You know, maybe a couple of the clients weren't that bad, but the setup or the premise or the the context, of the working arrangement, maybe that wasn't ideal. Maybe you like the clients, you just didn't like what you're doing for them. There's just so many things you get to learn from that. While you're going through all those experiences, you get to see what your profitable niche might be. But it doesn't end there, right? You get to have that hypothesis, but then you're going to have to test it and see if there's a demand. Again, it needs to be a profitable niche.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, and please let me know if I'm wrong, niching down isn't just finding that ideal person. It's also about what you love to do. And
of course,
if because I know, let's face it, right? We probably all have taken on a job, and even when we sent the proposal, we were just like, we really don't want to do this.
Right. There's a red flag or something inkling in the background. And, and sometimes you do it for money, right? It's just that, I love non-sugar-coated conversations. And I want this to be another one of those things,
Absolutely.
Let's face it. Sometimes we do it for the money or for the sake of a cash flow. But the end result is always the same, right? We regret it because it took so long, or it took so long to get paid, or it took up so much time that you couldn't really, you might have missed an opportunity because of it. At the end, we learned the same lesson. But the thing is, you want to have your own experience going through with that. You can read all about other people's experiences, but you want to feel it. You want to be present with those experiences. Bad experiences are not actually bad.
And well, you're right. You're absolutely right. But see, I didn't look at things like that. I always looked at it as being a person. So it's really cool and almost refreshing to hear that niching down doesn't have to be necessarily a person, but it can be your product or your service, or the way that you're doing business can look differently.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah. That's so, isn't that like this? Oh, it's awesome to hear that. Right? It's like, okay, so let's talk about some of the biggest mistakes that you see, because you've been working with clients for a long time on niching down. In fact, you talk about, niching down in your business doesn't have to be limiting or boring.
No.
And I really believe we think that. We feel that. A lot of us do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some mistakes so that we don't feel so limited and boring.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, exactly. So, the dealing with those concerns and fears is definitely a big part of it. So, some people might say running a business is all about 90% mindset and 10% strategy. Some people say 80-20 based on 80-20 rule, that sort of stuff. But it doesn't matter 80% or 90%, it's up there, right? So that's part of the mistake as well, and the first mistake is definitely a lack of understanding, what it is to really define your profitable niche. And we touched on that a little bit, right? And we sort of debunked the myth of it needs to be, the sort of like an ICA based, right? Ideal customer avatar based. It doesn't really have to be. And, if I can touch on the framework itself, I can make it very quickly that, there will be 3 circles, right? 2 circles on top and 1 circle at the bottom. That's called the Venn diagram. And there's in the middle, there's the overlapping part. That's what you wanted to tap into. I don't have anything to present in terms of visual, but I'm sure you can visualize that quickly, right?
Right.
So the top 2 circles, to the left, it's all about your experience and your expertise. But when I say experience, I don't talk about your work experience or your skill set. It's the experience you bring into the table. If you work with your client, how does that person feel when that person's working with you. So that's the experience that I talk about. And of course, expertise, what you are great at or what you love doing. So that's part of that, right? The next circle to the right would be the one that's the market. Obviously you're not selling to yourself. You have to sell to someone else, and there has to be a market. How do you define it, right? And at the bottom is the delivery circle. That's all the how is housed. How do you price it, right? How do you deliver it? What's the duration of time? Is it via audio, remotely, in person? All those hows are housed at the bottom. The problem is that everybody wants to go to that third circle first. How am I going to package this? How am I going to price it? How long should I continue? And they get into this whole decision fatigue, right? And analysis paralysis, that's the area. You're not supposed to go there first. That third circle should show up sort of naturally if you work on the first two circles. What are you good at? What kind of experience? Is that excitement or calmness or reliability? What kind of experience are you bringing to the table? You really need to spend some time figuring that out, right? Then who would appreciate that the most? So that's when the quiz actually comes in. And that's why I created it, only because people look at niching down to be something completely different. And I really wanted people to see you can slice the market differently based on what you're great at. It's sort of like a matchmaking, right? And there are only 11 questions, and it doesn't take more than 2 minutes, seriously. But that's more like an assessment quiz. It's not like a, BuzzFeed fun quiz. But you will definitely take something out of it, and you'll save a lot of time by just taking that, so that you don't have to sit around with those 3 circles, racking your brains out. Like, you don't really need to do that.
Right. And, as you were talking, I was like, you know what? I was so guilty of that in the earlier years, of thinking, okay, first, let me create this product. And in mine, it was a service and different packages. And you're right. I absolutely started with the how at the bottom. And I believe it came from lack of confidence.
Sure.
Of why I started there. Right. And then once I realized the top, which I didn't realize I had the top 2 until I realized I had the top 2.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think I just naturally reversed it. But you're right. I was doing that. And I was definitely doing that, starting with the how.
If you visually see that Venn diagram, you go, oh, okay. Maybe you had a hunch or like a gut feelings about this, but when it gets all laid out visually, that just looks so different. You get to just see it and you go, oh my God, this is what I was missing. So
exactly. And I think so many times, especially as a business owner, and if we're solopreneurs, if we're the only person in our business managing it, we don't have a team to bring ideas to help us brainstorm. We're trying to figure it out on our own. We miss these big aha moments that you're sharing right now. And thank you. This is such a great point, to have that diagram and just start at the top, and then the bottom will come naturally.
Exactly. It's an easier way to go about it. Seriously.
It's liberating. I mean, just even that one, I know we're going to be talking about a couple other
bunch more.
things. But I'm like, even just that one, it's like, okay, yes, that's step one that I could be doing differently. What's another mistake that you see?
Well, allowing this confirmation bias to creep up. We do have a lot of biases, and it's okay. It's okay. That's normal, right? We're all humans, and it's okay for us to have biases. But when we don't really have any awareness of the existence of, those biases, you're making decisions just based on your feelings or emotions or hunch or gut feelings. Well, some people are very good at it. I'm not one of those. I have to be honest with you. Like, sometimes my hunches can be completely wrong. And the confirmation bias is where, we want to believe what we want to believe. And that's so hard to fight, right? So if you start from the bottom circle, going back to the framework, we start from a how, and then you come up with a package, for example, how long that's going to last, how much it's going to cost, and what is involved with it. How do you deliver it, right? How quickly are you going to deliver it? If you start from there, you kind of wanted to believe that will work for your business and for you as well, right? That's confirmation bias. You kind of have to nix that when you are experimenting. So very analytical people are good with this part. But most of us entrepreneurs, especially creative entrepreneurs, that's not their strong suit, So taking emotions and feelings out of the equation is not an easy thing to do, but it's required. You have to set aside those things. Look at whatever you created as a hypothesis. You're going to test it without investing your emotional, like thoughts and feelings into it. If it doesn't work, you're going to have to be able to just drop it and redirect.
So when you say through the experimenting, what is that experimenting you're talking about?
So that's the normal validation process, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately speaking, I can, get to the point very quickly. Do you find anybody who's willing to pay for it? Not just the lip service, oh yeah, no, that sounds great. I will definitely go for that. Is not a confirmation, by the way.
Right. Because everybody will tell you, yeah, sure. But will they reach out their person, pay for it?
Yeah, exactly. But are you ready to put your credit card down? Are you ready to make that payment? That's the ultimately, that's the experiment, well, I should say that's the kind of result that you're looking for from your experiment. So sometimes, it's a tried and, tested method of doing training or free workshop. That's a good one to do. Or you get to do one-on-one, right? Like you can call up a few past clients or prospects or whatnot and see if they would be willing to get on the call with you. It doesn't have to be so complicated. Like you don't need to create this crazy, rabbit hole looking funnel to find out whether or not they're going to pay. If you're gravitated towards something like that, you really have to question your confidence because you might be trying to hide behind that, I don't know, crafty funnel that you're building up. It doesn't have to be just pick up the phone and talk to someone. Would that person be willing to pay for it or not? It can be that simple.
That's such a great tip. I know I went through a rebrand in the beginning of this year, soon to be last year. And something that I did differently with that rebrand is I did pick up the phone. And not only did I call some of my current, in fact, I've called very few of my current. I called people that I knew who were what I believe my ideal audience, right? The clients I wanted. And asked them just like 3 questions about what they needed. And, what was it worth to them and what would make them make that decision? And the information I got back was so valuable. I was like, why didn't I do this a long time ago? It's just because they're willing to tell you. If you ask them, they will tell you exactly where they are and what they want.
I'm actually doing something similar right now. It's not for my rebranding or anything. I'm just purely doing some research. And really, like, if you spend enough time coming up with the right types of questions, the questions that are not leading, questions that are open-ending questions, they are more, open to share their thoughts with you. And the insights you get, just as you said, it's so invaluable. Like, why would you run a survey? Now you're hiding behind the survey. You need to really ask yourself a question, why you're doing that, right? You're not feeling strong about this, you're worried that you're going to get some kind of a negative feedback. There's no such thing as positive versus negative feedback. It's just the feedback. You decide, as the CEO of your company, which feedback to take up on, because their journeys are different, their situations are different, their beliefs are different, and you have to digest it in a way that would work for you.
And what I learned through that, just to kind of add to what you're saying, is if you send out a survey, which they have their purpose in their own way.
Sure. There's a place for that.
Really want to uncover your business and your niche, or what do your clients want, and identify that niche a little bit more clear. Calling them, a lot of times the first thing they say is not the truth. It's not that they're intentionally lying. It's that they don't realize that there's really something deeper below that. And as you ask questions, not guiding, but just ask them to explain it, they even have like this moment where they're like, you're right.
So true. No, so true. It's about like, I don't know who said it, but you need to ask why 7 times or something, right? To peel off those layers after layers. And they're not, you're right, they're not intentionally hiding anything. It's just that, they're accustomed to answer certain questions in a certain way, and they don't even think twice about it. But, it's your job to unearth all of it, to say, how did you come up with that answer? What made you to feel that way?
Right.
They're going to think a little bit more on it, and they'll tell you what you're looking for. So you're right that just asking those like surface level questions, would you recommend my business to someone else? I'm like, God, please don't ask that question. Right? So, that's the kind of thing. Like, unless you're, running this $multi billion SaaS, product or something. Yeah, no, there's a place for surveying for sure.
Right.
But for solopreneurs to small size entrepreneurs, service-based entrepreneurs, that's not the best method.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree. What's another mistake that you see?
I would say that, it requires a high level of a commitment in order for you to really find your profitable niche that's been always in front of you. Actually, like I said, it's not about picking or finding, because some people talk about niching down as if you're walking down this cereal aisle at a grocery store and you decided to pick one off the shelf.
Right.
And some people even say like, are you in the fitness niche or are you in the business niche? I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? Those are not niches, those are sectors, and each of them are $1 trillion sectors. That's not a niche whatsoever, right?
So I get that question too
a lot, right?
Yeah.
You're not just, I don't know, like Russian rouletting to see like which one's going to show up. I'm like, ooh, okay, beauty niche. I'm like, beauty sector is trillion, ages range from 13 to God knows 86. I don't know, but it's it's crazy. Like that's not a niche. That's a sector. That's an industry. But anyway, the whole point of this tip is not to really think that it's going to be like set it and forget it or pick one and stick to it. That's not the way it goes. So you do have to be committed, especially when the going gets tough. You're not really finding enough evidence to support it, or you're still experimenting. It's not an easy process. And also it's not a linear process. So sometimes you may take 2 steps forward and you're thinking, I'm getting closer. Then there might be a setback that you may have to take a step back. Or you may take a step forward, but you have to take 2 steps back. It's just not a linear process. You have to be patient, and you need to be able to commit to it. Once you make a decision, you just have to see through the entire process.
How long does that process typically take? Is there a set amount of time?
It could be as short as a couple of weeks, and it could be as long as, 13 months, for example. Like I said, the validation process doesn't have to be that complicated, right? So it really depends on how intense, like how much of an intensity you wanted to put in that process. If you really wanted to discover, and you're, say, like, setting a goal of speaking to at least 30 people over 2 weeks time or something like that, that may not get you the answer that you're looking for, but that'll probably get you to 2/3 of the process, understanding what kind of voices that you're hearing from those people.
Right.
At least that activity, that business activity alone will clarify what the next step can be. So it really varies, but you can intensify and shorten the time period if you want to.
Okay. All right. So it needs commitment too. What about or what, on 4, I think, right? Or
something
5,
like that. We're getting to, we covered a lot of things, but another thing that I would bring up, the biggest mistake is not having any systems in place. But when I say systems,
preach.
I'm not talking about like the tech stack or something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about tools per se, but for example, you do have to have a support system.
Okay. Right? Okay. Then I misunderstood. I was thinking of like automation, get things moving.
Right. Yeah, that's down the road. Yeah, that's down the road. Once you discover what your profitable niche is, then of course those things will come up. But we're kind of talking about how to go about this process of spotting, discovering, unearthing your profitable niche. So that I'm not going to touch on it, but having a support system, again, when the going gets tough, when you feel like you hit the wall, who do you speak to? Someone who's done it before, or someone who might be a couple steps ahead of you, someone you can trust, aiming for something similar. That is really, really important, so that you don't have to feel like you're the only one doing this. That's hardly the case. That is not the case. But a lot of people, the business owners feel alone when they are going through with that process, especially during the messy middle, so-called messy middle. In the middle of any process, sometimes nothing happens for days. Right?
Right.
It feels like you're not making progress. And it feels like you should have been further along, whatever you're thinking or feeling. That's when a lot of people give up, right? So they don't see the end of it. And that kind of support system, the mental support system, comes in really, really handy. Another system that I wanted to talk about is the tracking system. That is more like on the tech side of things. You do want to measure things. You wanted to track things. You wanted to get data out of things. So don't be afraid of those things. Like I know some, especially creative business owners or creative entrepreneurs, they say, they don't like numbers. They don't like looking at them, all those things. But numbers tell stories, and that's the end of it.
They do.
There's no ifs and buts about it. You need to learn to love it, and you can. It's not that hard, right? So that is something that you wanted to focus on. So it's not about just a hunch or gut feeling. So what's trending right now? It's more about the data that you gather, yay or nay. Some people said, oh, that's a nice to have, what's the degree of it? How imminent is it that you're offering?
Right.
How painful is it for them to solve? How bad do they want it? Some things are kind of like qualitative things, right? But some qualitative things can be quantified. So don't give up there, and see if you can convert what you're gathering into some type of data.
What type of data do you look at when it comes to identifying your niche?
Right. So there's no like a one formula to this. as you recall, we talked about the validation process, right? The
Right.
whole purpose of validation process is, are they willing to pay for this? Or are they just saying that to be nice to you? Right? If you
Right.
figure out a way to get to the bottom of it, would you be willing to pay for it? Because that line alone can scare the bejesus out of a lot of people. I know that, right? That you don't
Yeah.
want to talk about it. But you kind of have to. You can rephrase it any way you want, but the gist of it is that, when do you want to get started, right? Would you be willing to, put a deposit down, or some kind of, like a sign to show that we're moving forward? Once you get
Right.
to it, that number, depending on a sample size that you choose, whether you're speaking to 15 people or 7 people or 56 people, bigger the better, of course, just to even out all sorts of the variables that we can't even predict. The bigger the better, but you can tally that up. That's like the simplest data you can get. If you
Right.
think about it, it's not that scientific. You don't need any mathematical skills to figure that out. It's actually
Right.
pretty easy.
So you can look at just your prospects versus how many actually move forward. And
Right.
I suppose you can even look at your prior clients, the
Mm-hmm.
profitable ones,
Yeah.
right? Identify the profitable ones that you have worked with and looked at characteristics of not just the person, but the entire
Right.
structure of that job,
Yep.
and identify things that were similar
So
that
many, like, organizational sizes, right?
right, right,
Or whether that was the nonprofit versus for profit, you
right.
know were they globally located, or purely based in where you're based in, or
Mhm.
the or the sectors and the industries. But a lot of times people only focus on those things, but you can have all those filters and see where you land. And sometimes it could be sector driven. That's okay if it turns out to be that way. You just don't want to assume that's the case,
Mm,
right?
that's the key right there, yeah.
Right. Like, for example, here's an example. Some people are great working with family-owned businesses, like going for generations.
Right.
And some people absolutely avoid that setup because the family
Mhm.
situations, right?
Right, yeah,
Yeah,
it's different. It's
it's
a different beast.
right, exactly. But if you think about that, that's not a sector, right?
Right.
It's a setup.
Mm,
So there are many things that you can look at.
yeah. So I have one more question for you, and this is
Yes.
about you.
Okay.
So so
Ooh.
I know, right? What would you say is one habit that you have that's helped you become so successful?
Well, first, let's define success.
Okay.
So let's do the twofold, answering
Yeah.
thing that I'm
That's
going to
that's a
opt
great
for.
point. 'Cause
Yeah,
success is different for everybody.
right. To me, I want to feel fulfilled and
Mhm.
content through my work. So that's the definition of it. So am I using my skill set, or what I'm great at, including
Right.
experience that I bring in? Because I'm not everybody's cup of tea, to be honest. I'm keenly aware of
I
it.
can't imagine that, Michael. I mean, you're so sweet.
Right. So like, it's through that unique package that I have, as a business owner.
Yes.
Am I being helpful? Am I serving? Am I helping them to deliver the kind of results that they're looking for? So that's the definition of success. If I get to achieve that, I call that a success. I'm not running a $1 billion company, let's just say, right? But that's not really my definition of success. It could be for someone's definition of
Yeah.
success, and
Yeah.
that's totally fine. There's nothing against it. Like, you can put a dollar amount on it. I'm not against it, but I just want to feel fulfilled. I wanted to feel
Right.
rewarded. I want them to feel rewarded, right? So now that's out of the way. I would think that only one thing, right? If I am to pick one
Well,
thing,
you can name a couple, but what's the biggest thing? If you have
right. Yeah, I think my strong suit would be to my ability to look at things differently. I consider myself, so I have two different quizzes. One quiz is the assessment, like a niche assessment quiz, and we talked a lot about that already.
Right.
But there's another one, it's more about the personality as an entrepreneur quiz. And using my own quiz, my archetype is acquired taste. So there are four different archetypes: acquired taste, community builder, crowd pleaser, and my way all the way. Okay. And I'm acquired taste. And that means I'm not for everyone. Right. But I'm so, I am the one for someone. Right. On
Yeah.
the other hand, the crowd pleasers, they're naturally great at solving universal problems. For example, how do you stop your dog, the pets, from chewing furniture or whatever that might be. I like to be specialized, so I'm not universally appealing all that much.
Right.
But the good part of that particular archetype is for us to be able to look at things different ways, package in different ways, explaining in different ways, and using different analogies and other things to make people understand, sometimes difficult concepts. So I leverage on that. I leverage on that. I don't shy away from it. I'm not apologetic for it.
Oh, I
Knowing
like
the
that
fact that
right
it's not
there.
for, yeah,
Good for you.
I put it up front. Like, this is how I look at it. This is how I describe it. Here are some examples and analogies. Do you like them? If you don't like them, that's no problem.
Right. Right. And I think that's so important to really understand who you are, how you're wired, because then you can pull from those strengths and not allow
Yeah,
it to limit you, because sometimes our strengths, when we don't realize what that is, they actually get in our way because we
true.
get in our way. But when you
Right.
identify it, now you can look at things a lot differently. I love that. And I need to take that quiz because I'm so curious now
Yeah,
where
which
I'm
type
going to
you
fall.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
need to
totally.
take it. I'm gonna be taking it today. So
Yeah, no, that would be
I'll have to
great.
share in the notes what I am with everybody.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I wanted to know what you are. And we all work together anyway. So those four archetypes, we can gel together. Another thing that I would say about it is that if you don't have the trait that you actually want, you can hire somebody with that trait. That you don't have to be
Yes.
everything and everyone. So for example, like my way of explaining it is too, specific and too targeted. I need a little bit more of a, I need to soften it a little bit more. Then I would look for somebody whose archetype is crowd pleaser and
Right.
see how they would translate the same information. That would be different, right? So you can use that differently. Like, you don't have to be, everybody and everything. And they sometimes crowd pleasers need to hire someone like myself to be a little bit more specific, right? Because they're
Right.
so appealing. I always use this analogy of they're like Coca-Cola. No one says, well, some people may, but no one says they hate Coca-Cola. It's something like that,
Yeah.
acquired taste. Like, I don't really have that ability.
Right. Right. That's a great point. A very good
Mhm.
point. Michael, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I'm so glad that we connected on
Absolutely.
Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm loving Twitter mainly because of you. I started on Twitter
Great.
and I got away when Facebook and everything, right,
Yep.
got
There are
real.
plenty.
I've drifted
Mhm.
and now I've rediscovered it again. And yeah, I have a whole new group of people that I'm connecting with, you included, and you make
Yeah.
it so much fun over there. So I'm so glad
Yeah. I'm
we
having
crossed paths.
fun. Yeah, no, totally. It's a silly thing, right? A lot of people roll their eyes a minute they hear about Twitter. I'm like, so your main platform is Twitter? I'm like, yeah. I know it's kind of funny, but it works for me. It's
Yeah.
it's so weird. For many, that's Instagram, right? You know,
Yes.
but yeah, no, for whatever reason, it works for me.
And keep doing it. Keep
Great,
doing it for
thanks.
as long as you can over there, because you do have a strong following. And I know you've made great friends over there as well.
Oh yeah, no,
I
totally.
saw
And
your
the
list of people you want to
things are
meet in real
different.
life.
Yeah, I actually no, absolutely. Like we communicate over DM and like a true DM sense. You know, it's not
Yes.
like a LinkedIn kind of DM. So
Yeah,
it's weird. It really depends on how you use it. Like you can
I agree.
definitely, you know, enjoy it.
I agree. Thank you so much, Maiko. For
You're welcome.
everybody who wants to find Maiko, all of her information, the links to her website, and of course her Twitter account, they're in the show notes. So definitely reach out to her. She can help you find your niche and uncover how to grow your business, become more profitable just by getting laser focused. So, Maiko, thank you again. I appreciate you.
My pleasure.
We'll see everybody. Bye.